Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
On Friday night, Jeremy Corbyn met up with some old friends for a Christmas party. Nothing unusual in that, you might think. But this was a fundraising do for the Stop the War Coalition, the anti-war protest group that Mr Corbyn chaired until his election as Labour leader. And in case you hadn't noticed, it caused a bit of a stir. But who exactly are Stop the War and why all the fuss? Here's our Ellie Price reporting.
It was the biggest mass demonstration in British history. The group that organised it, the Stop the War Coalition, had been founded a year or so before, following the 9/11 attacks and George W. Bush's declaration of war on terror. Around 1 million people marched as Tony Blair prepared to send troops into Iraq. Among the speakers, a backbench Labour MP.
Thousands more deaths in Iraq will not make things right. It will set off a spiral of conflict, of hate, of misery, of desperation.
One of the reasons for its success, I've always thought, is that everyone was united around one single issue. We never got bogged down in our political analyses of what we thought about Saddam Hussein or what we thought about this dictator or that, or how we thought the political solution should come about. We weren't there to offer solutions to other people's problems and, tell them how we thought it should be. We were there to stop our government taking what we considered to be a very, very bad and negative step.
But despite the broad support, the inner leadership has largely far-left roots. Stop the War's founding member and convener Lindsay German was a member of the Socialist Workers' Party for over 30 years, sitting on its central committee. She resigned in 2010. Her partner John Rees is also co-founder of Stop the War and was a leading figure in the SWP. He also resigned in 2010. He sits on the editorial board of Counterfire, a political organisation created after that SWP split. He also helped start up the People's Assembly Against Austerity, which has been organising protests since 2013. He's often sparked controversy, reportedly writing in 2006, for example, that socialists should unconditionally stand with the oppressed against the oppressor, even if the people who run the oppressed country are undemocratic and persecute minorities, like Saddam Hussein. Andrew Murray was the Stop the War Coalition chairman from 2001 until 2011. He's a member of the Communist Party and Chief of Staff of Len McCluskey's union Unite. In 2014, he spoke at the launch event of a campaign called Solidarity with the Anti-Fascist Resistance in Ukraine, which supports anti-government rebels there. He took back the chairmanship again in September this year, taking over from Jeremy Corbyn, who'd held the post from 2011 until his election as Labour leader. As well as its elected officers, Stop the War has patrons who include Labour MP Diane Abbott, George Galloway, the writer Tariq Ali, and Kamal Majid, a founding member of the Stalin Society, formed in 1991 to defend Stalin and his work.
The 2003 protest against the Iraq War, which took place here in Hyde Park, was the high point of Stop the War.
The prominent human rights activist Peter Tatchell never played an official role at Stop the War, though he has participated and spoken at numerous events. But this week he took a very public step back. And claimed the organisation had lost its moral compass.
The shortcomings in Stop the War are driven by basically about half a dozen people at the top. And those views increasingly are not shared by many of their long-time grassroots supporters. Like me and many, many others, people are turned off by the sectarianism, by the selective opposition to war, and by the failure to speak out against human rights abuses by regimes that happen to be on the receiving end of US and British military intervention.
Critics like Tatchell have accused Stop the War of trying to silence those whose views don't fit their own.
Nothing will be achieved by trying to shout down speakers.
This video shows a Stop the War official clashing with a protester during a rally about Western policy in Iran in 2012 as Jeremy Corbyn makes a speech.
To please stop this misbehaviour now.
This meeting last month caused controversy when Syrians in the audience said they weren't allowed to speak.
There is one reason that there's no Syrian from this room on the platform, and that is because they support intervention and the meeting is against intervention.
What's really disturbing is the way in which Diane Abbott closed down the meeting rather than allow Syrian democratic left-wing and civil society activists to speak. It's given the impression that she shares the questionable politics of Stop the War on the issue of Syria.
But Stop the War insists a Syrian contributor did ask a question from the floor of that meeting and have rubbished the suggestion they support those who Western governments oppose.
Obviously, you'll have seen in recent days Stop the War explaining that they were completely opposed to Russian intervention in Syria as well as British intervention. So, they are even-handed. The reason I think that people may think that is because we are a campaign based in Britain, and our campaigning is obviously overwhelmingly orientated towards changing our own government's policy.
Welcome to Islington in North London. Now, in there is Jeremy Corbyn's constituency office. The building's also home to the Stop the War coalition. But it's the figurative proximity rather than the literal one that some are worried about. I spoke to a number of Labour MPs who voted against airstrikes in Syria. One told me that he wasn't so much worried about Stop the War and the influence it may have on Jeremy Corbyn and policy, but more that Jeremy Corbyn simply shares their views. There's dissent at the grassroots too. Last week, 500 party members, including councillors, wrote to Mr Corbyn urging him to take a step back.
Stop the War is not a Labour Party organisation. There are many people in it who have opposed the Labour Party and probably continue to oppose the Labour Party. I don't believe they hold to the values of solidarity, internationalism and anti-fascism.
We also spoke to a number of Labour MPs who were relaxed about Jeremy Corbyn's connection to Stop the War, an organisation he's never made any secret of supporting.
Hi, how you doing?
On Friday he went to the Christmas do and said slurs by critics against Stop the War were an attempt to close down democratic debate and campaigning. He knows some of those critics include his own MPs.
And we're joined now from Leeds by the Labour MP Richard Bergen. He's a shadow Treasury Minister. Mr Bergen, welcome to the programme.
Good morning, Andrew.
The Communist Party of Britain, which has prominent members in Stop the War, says that attacks on Stop the War are, quote, a systematic and vicious propaganda offensive designed to obscure British imperialism's agenda in conducting the bombing campaign in Syria. Do you agree with that?
Well, first of all, I think I'm in a good position to answer some of these questions because I've only ever been a member of the Labour Party. I joined when I was 15. And what I really want to focus on is not the members of small political parties who may be involved in Stop the War coalition, but the tens of thousands. In fact, they've got an email list of 150,000 people who are involved, many of whom are not in any political party, many of whom are in the Labour Party.
The chairman that has taken over from Mr Corbyn is a member of the Communist Party of Britain, so what's the answer to my question?
I think that the attacks on Stop the War are proxy attacks on Jeremy Corbyn. We haven't had this previously. When Charles Kennedy was speaking at the 2003 demonstration against the Iraq War, which 2 million people attended, the Liberal Democrats and Charles Kennedy weren't attacked for that, and quite rightly so.
But he wasn't a member of Stop the War.
Pardon?
He wasn't a member of the Stop the War coalition.
He spoke on the Stop the War
but he wasn't
platform.
a member.
Well, I'm not a member of the Stop the War coalition, but I think there's a really important democratic point here in that it is right that people in a democratic society express their opinion to their MPs, march, campaign and demonstrate against military interventions that they think are incorrect. And I do think that the line and the leadership of the Stop the War coalition hasn't really changed in the 14 years since it was founded. What has changed is that Jeremy Corbyn has become leader of the Labour Party, and so people in the media and elsewhere who wish to attack Jeremy Corbyn are using Stop the War to do so.
Of course, it's not just the media, is it? It's not even the media. Labour MPs, Tristan Hunt, Stella Creasy, Michael Duggar, many more, Jess Phillips, they've all attacked Stop the War and Mr Corbyn's association with it.
I think the truth is that the majority of Labour MPs, the majority of members of the Shadow Cabinet and the majority of Labour members agreed with Jeremy Corbyn on his analysis on whether or not we should agree to David Cameron's proposal to bomb Syria.
But what do you say to their criticism of Mr Corbyn's continued association with Stop the War?
I think they're mistaken. I think that Stop the War, we've got to look at how Stop the War has involved people from right across the political spectrum. When I was on that march in 2003, that historical march, there wasn't just the Lib Dem leader speaking, there were also people I spoke to who were Conservative voters. So it's not just the 57 varieties of Trotskyite groups that are involved. If it were the case that it were merely people on the ultra-left, then you wouldn't have thousands of people involved. You wouldn't have 150,000 people on the
among
email
the leadership
list.
and Stop the War, who is not either a communist, a Trotskyite or a Stalinist?
Well, there are plenty of trade unions involved in the leadership of Stop the
among
War.
the leadership, the people who lead this, whose names are associated with it, who doesn't fall into that small hard left category?
Well, it is a coalition, and that's the point of it. It's not
so
about
give me another name that doesn't fall into that.
Well, I wouldn't even know the full list of people on the board of Stop the War, but what I do know is that there are people from trade unions supporting it, there are trade unions supporting it, probably in terms of the membership of the Stop the War coalition, the biggest composite of that are Labour Party members. But I do think this is a distraction from the democratic issue. We can't say that in this country, being a member of a Stop the War coalition campaigning against military interventions that were proven to be disastrous in Iraq and Libya is wrong. It's part of an open democratic process.
I perfectly understand
and people shouldn't be demonised for being part of it.
I'm not
Jeremy Corbyn certainly shouldn't be demonised for being part of it.
What I'm trying to find out is what Stop the War really stands for and whether it's right that Mr Corbyn and other Labour people should be associated with it. For example, Stop the War published an article last year. This was the title: Sociopaths United, the West versus ISIS is a marriage made in hell. Beneath the veneer of humanitarianism, the United States, Britain and their allies are no less sociopathic than the enemies they propose to hunt down. So, British security forces are on a par with the beheaders. Do you agree with that?
Well, I certainly don't agree with that. And I think that there have been things published on blogs on the Stop the War website which are certainly wrong, which I certainly wouldn't agree with, and certainly the vast majority of people who are members of the Stop the War coalition wouldn't agree with. I was reading in the paper this morning that the management of the website of the Stop the War has changed, and if that shows that they're going to be more careful to ensure that the content of the website on every occasion mirrors or reflects, the view of the leadership of the Stop the War coalition, then that's a welcome move.
Well, it's certainly, if it's such a splendid organisation, it does keep having to delete so many articles that it posts prominently. It's deleted and recently comparing Islamic State to the anti-Franco International Brigade, blaming the Paris attacks on French policy, claiming that the threat to the Yazidis was largely mythical, indeed false, advocating it was time to go to war with Israel, which is an interesting position for a group calling itself Stop the War, and publish a poem that quotes a well-known anti-Semite and Holocaust denier. All of that it's had to take down. Does that sound like a respectable organisation that the Labour Party should be associated with?
Well, the views that you've uncovered aren't views, obviously, that I or members of the Stop the War coalition would agree. But the big picture is this. In a coalition, there are all sorts of people, individuals, small numbers of individuals who'll come out with unacceptable views. But the fact is, I'm interested in the democratic point, in the 2 million people that marched on the 15th of February 2003, in the thousands that have protested against the intervention in Libya and against the intervention in Syria. I'm not a pacifist, but I think that the truth is that the Stop the War coalition and the ordinary people, from vicars to pensioners, who marched against the war in Iraq, who marched against the intervention in Libya and who've demonstrated against the intervention in Syria, they've got it right.
Okay.
And many of the people attacking Jeremy Corbyn and many of the people attacking the Stop the War coalition have got it completely wrong. And it's
Well,
a topsy-turvy
of course.
world we're in when attending Stop the War events is controversial, but
Right.
still pretending that Tony Blair and others got it right in Iraq is
I'm
seen
sorry,
as
we haven't got
moderate. That's
much
a
time.
topsy-turvy world indeed.
We haven't got much time, Mr. Bergen. I just wanted to ask you this. Mr. Corbyn stuck to his guns. He went to the fundraiser. His spin doctor, Seamus Milne, says that the Labour Party is now slowly cohering round Mr. Corbyn's views across a range of issues. Do you agree with that?
Well, I do. As I mentioned earlier, Jeremy Corbyn didn't instruct or order Labour MPs to vote against David Cameron's plan to bomb Syria. He gave them a free vote, and it was the right thing to do. And by a ratio of 2-to-1, Labour MPs agreed with Jeremy Corbyn's analysis. By a ratio of 2-to-1, members of the Shadow Cabinet agreed and voted with Jeremy Corbyn's analysis. But on the issues such as the working families tax credits, on issues such as police cuts, on issues such as attacking George Osborne's failed economic programme of cuts and privatisation, the vast majority of Labour MPs, the vast majority of Labour members, and as we've seen in Oldham, in the successful by-election, a lot of the public agree with him.
OK, Richard Bergen, thank you for joining us, and also thank you for persevering with the earpiece. Clearly you had a bit of a problem. I'm grateful
Thanks very much, Andrew.
that you stuck with it. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
I've been